On behalf of our group, I would like to take this opportunity to talk to you about decision support information and analytical technology in discharged military personnel employment. But before we start, I'm very sorry to share with you the bitterness of loss of one of our colleagues, Peter Ivashchenko, who has left this world. He made invaluable contribution to our research and was the person who developed mathematical economical methods for the study. The research materials suggest the use of decision support informational analytical technology in discharged military personnel employment developed by its authors. And in contrast to the usual processing of survey results, it makes possible to obtain more information for decision making. Adherence to such approach in the development of public administration mechanism, it increases the likelihood that in the case of their implementation in the country, the positive changes will be expected, as they will indirectly take into account the availability of necessary resources. Information and analytical technology to support decision in the field of labor economics substantiates the developments of the example of discharged servicemen social welfare. In order to determine the advantages in functioning of one or another of the mechanisms suggested above, a questionnaire for military personnel was developed. The servicemen were invited to act as an expert and evaluate the options for the formation of social welfare mechanism for retired servicemen. We developed a military personnel questionnaire to determine the advantages in the functioning of one or another of the mechanisms suggested above. And we invited the acting servicemen to evaluate the options for the formation of social welfare mechanism for the retired military personnel. And in this part of my presentation, I'll be showing you some tables. The servicemen evaluated the proposed options in a 10-point scale. Provided that all the proposed opportunities exist, what exactly did you see when you were released to the reserve? Evaluate each of the proposed options in terms of need to form a public, good military service. The third, evaluate each of the proposed options in terms of the need for economic development of the state. The fourth, evaluate each of the proposed options in terms of the need to ensure the security of the state and whole social, economic, military, demographic, and state secrecy. The next one, provided that all the proposed options exist, predict the quality of implementation of each in our country. And the sixth, estimate the cost of the state for each of the options. In figure 1.6, it is presented the empirical distribution of the results of a survey for 40 retired servicemen, according to 6 criteria provided that the specialties are combined on a 10-point scale. The following can be said about the peculiarities of the 6 given empirical criteria allocated. Despite the presence of the significant differences in the answers, they are characterized by categorical of answers for the lowest and highest score. The significance of the neutral nature of the answers to the criteria can be verified using students' t-test, or by its non-parametric alternative, the Kolmogorov-Smirnov criterion. A complete description of the median responses of servicemen comparison is given in the table. We advance a number of hypotheses that the medians do not differ in pairs by 5%. Since the variables C are measured on an ordinal scale to test hypothesis 3, 4, we use the non-parametric Wilson test. The averages and the magnitude of variation for the vectors of the statistical population given by matrix Y are calculated and constructed in the program Statistica. The results are presented graphically in figure. We apply correspondence analysis. In the table, it is shown a fragment of the frequency matrix obtained by the transition from frequencies to particulars. According to the table, using the tool of associative corresponding or relevant analysis, we established associative links between criteria and specialties. The results are obtained by analyzing figure. The extended correlation matrix for variables C1, C6 has a form given in the table. The close positive relationship between the variables C1, C6 is indicated in bold. The set of close relationships gives rise to the following structure that need to be studied further. Data analysis table and figures suggest the existence of 3 or 4 generalizing factors, which largely cover the percentage of the total variables from C1 up to C6 variances. Using the method of factor analysis and taking into account the presence of a close correlation between the variables C1, C2, C3 and C4, we build a table. Table 4 presents the factor loads, pairwise correlation coefficient between C and Fj, as well as the total variances of the factors and their fate. Sets of significant laws are highlighted in bold. Factors loads are obtained by the method of principal components with subsequent oblique rotation, very max normalized. Based on the comparative analysis method of public administration experience and using the methods of analysis of society hierarchies, we built a scheme of hierarchies for choosing the option of social welfare of servicemen discharged to the reserve. The developed decision support information analytical technology in the field of labor economics within its context provides the following components: establishment of social welfare mechanism, development of questionnaire regarding the use of the appropriate mechanisms, statistical analysis of survey results, meaningful interpretation and decision making. So, according to the results of data processing, it established that respondents prefer such mechanism as the state management mechanism for development of the military instructor social institution, and the state management mechanism of ex-servicemen retraining and their support in criterion their own businesses and running business. This is important information for the resources allocation for the operation of these mechanisms. Despite the fact that according to figure 10 criteria C2, C3 and C4 are equivalent, among them the most important in the opinion of respondents is C2 criteria. This criterion is the need to form a public good military service. Despite the fact that according to figure 10 criteria C2, C3 and C4 are equivalent, among them the most important in the opinion of respondents is C2 criteria. This criterion is the need to form a public good military security, because it has the largest number of links with others. This is important information that shows that the servicemen who took part in the survey are worried about the fate of the state and they are patriotic. The relatively low value of C5 criterion, that means the idea of the quality of implementation of each of the mechanisms, indicates distrust of the military's implementation of socio-economic policy in the state. This is important information for further research in this area. Thus, the implementation of the development decision support information analytical technology in the field of labor economics makes it possible to obtain more information for decision making in comparison with the usual processing of survey results. According to the content, the developed decision support informational analytical technology in the field of labor economics provides for the following components: formation of social protection mechanisms, development of a questionnaire on the use of appropriate mechanisms, statistical analysis of survey results, such as generation of empirical distributions of answers to questions' relative frequencies, comparison of answers medians, correspondence analysis, factor analysis, analysis of hierarchies, and meaningful interpretation as well as decision making. After all is said and done, according to the results of data processing, I think we can conclude that respondents prefer such mechanism as a state management mechanism for development of the military instructor social institution, and the state management mechanism for ex-servicemen retraining and their support in creation their own business and running business. This is important information for the resources allocation for the operation of these mechanisms. The servicemen who took part in this survey are worried about the fate of the state and they are patriotic. And the third one, there is a distrust of the military personnel in the implementation of social economic policy in the state. This is an important information for further research in this field. So, thank you for listening. I hope you find it interesting.